running the affairs of the country. And therefore, even as we plan these talks across the country, and of course looking forward to have them moving in tandem with the protests that are slated to begin once again after the coalition, or after that conversation of Eid, then definitely we get the country moving to that space of the conversations. And we're saying that this will run in concurrent with, of course, the bipartisan talks. This is what the Right Honorable Raila Odinga says, and he is focused to make sure that at least the government then address this in the best way they think is good for the country. He spoke this when he joined Christian faithful for Sunday service at St. Peter's ACK Church, that is along Jogoo Road, right before he led a rally in Kamkunji grounds, saying the same. Well, of course, alongside other meetings are a precursor to the resumption of these protests that are there. Welcome on board. This is what we'll be discussing this morning, this even as the government says that all this that the Azimio team is doing is focused on jeopardizing the process of peace. It has been a weekend full of political play, and likely, of course, we will experience the same throughout the week. We'll certainly be here to keep you up to tabs as we have conversations revolving around this. Kenyans are asking, can we trust the president when he says that finally unga will be affordable? And the other side, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga says then it has to be less than 100 or less than 100 and not 150 or anything. It's that week that we'll be looking forward to see this reprieve for a majority of Kenyans that are continuing to suffer and struggle because of the high cost of living. Join me on this very conversation. The hashtag is Morning Cafe at Linda_Lela TV47KA, and I'll be sampling some of your comments as we continue with the broadcast. Once again, the broadcast begins right away. This is Morning Cafe. My name is Linda Lela. I know it's a bit chilly in Nairobi, but we have to do this. And for those of you who are tuned in from across the different parts of the country, karibu sana, and those ones who are watching us globally as well, thank you so much for always trusting us right here on TV47. We have lots lined up for you on this Monday morning, including that conversation as pertaining to that. Also later on, we'll be getting to know what's been over the weekend into the questions of sports action. We're doing it a bit different, and so Dennis, the likes of Hans and the team, will be joining us to give us updates on what the sporty action has been and what to expect in the course of the week. But before then, allow us to look at the papers and then the stories that have been prepared by my team. We have the Standard newspaper, the Daily Nation, as well as the People Daily, and these ones will allow us to know what is playing out in the country. We decipher on these key stories as we continue with the broadcast. The front page of the Daily Nation on this 17th day of April 2023, tragic story of Mukumu girls' health woes. This has been there for the better part of last week and last week, but one quite an unfortunate occurrence. We have seen, of course, the CS for Matters Education taking that action to transfer the head, that is, of Mukumu girls, even as we continue to try and see what really could have informed these cases. Of course, we are getting reports from health practitioners, but then again, still not fulfilling or still not answering the questions that we'd want. I wish I could have given my own life to save my daughter, because even if we know the cause of her death, that will not bring her back to life. These were the painful words of Joyce Oyugi as she addressed mourners at the burial of her daughter Wednesday last week. Wendy Abeti Oyugi, 14, a Form 1 student at the Sacred Heart Mukumu Girls High School in Kakamega County, had her life cut short by a bacterial infection, which has claimed two other students, or the lives of two other students and a teacher at the school. This is a story captured on page 10. It's been quite a sad moment for the people of Mukumu, and definitely the nation at large, and the education, fraternity, just to get to understand what could have informed this, and also playing out in other schools as we continue to try and see whether the same would be unraveled. It's a developing story. We'll certainly be here to keep you up to tabs. It runs, of course, in relation to the question of health, and not forgetting as well what it is like in the conversation of, what is on the world of education. That is the Daily Nation. I'm sorry, we're trying to sort of fix this. Jose Kamagor is in here, claims Right Honorable Raila Odinga, and therefore calls upon the government to be keen on making sure that they put some essence of goodwill in addressing these questions that they have raised, especially also on the opening of the server and the credibility of the 2022 general election. This is what we'll be looking at in conversation this morning, and so we ask that you are part and parcel of it. Well, this is acting up, but not a problem. We'll definitely get to have the first stories as well on the healthcare costs that are choking families in the country. We're talking about price changes of commonly prescribed drugs, and the 21,900 is the amount of patient or the number of patients now require annually for a standard daily dose of a table or a tablet of Lasastan. That is 3,650, or that was, that is, yes, from 3,650 previously. Okay, there you go. That means the number has shot up significantly, which is quite unfortunate. And of course, they speak of the couple of things that are happening right here in the country in relation to the question of health and what really needs to be done so that we have the same addressed, the high cost of living, then in relation as well to the question of how we are able to access healthcare. It's one of the key things that the government is keen on making sure that they address for purposes of just ensuring that we have a healthy nation. And so that is one also of the things that we'll be discussing this morning. And not forgetting this story here, I will not be cowed by Azimio's ICC threats, says police boss Japhet Koome, a story captured on page 8. This is one also of the stories that we'll be looking at, and we just seek to understand the ramifications of the same, having seen the detailed letter that was presented to the ICC, International Criminal Court, and of course implicating Koome so much so in relation to what played out during the times of the demonstrations of Azimio, which they say are slated to begin again. That is immediately after the Eid session. And also let's take a look at what we have on the Standard newspaper. On the Standard newspaper front page, members of parliament at heart of country's ballooning debt. There's a story captured on page 10, and we're talking about the fact that then they're also responsible of making adjustments in terms of the debt ceiling, and over years they have been raising it to a point of around 9-point-something trillion, something that really is unmanageable as it stands. We are not able to sustain the own budget or our own budget, because then we're not collecting enough. Then the fear is that we might not be able as well to just service this very debt. And of course, an expounded report in relation to the debt situation in the country and what really requires to be done. This on the other side, as IMF seeks openness on fuel subsidy, a story captured on page 20. We all understand very well that before they even get to give you a loan, they will always want to perhaps just look at some of the activities and sectors that are playing out in the country, and in most cases the IMF and the World Bank would propose adjustments, and therefore they also get to understand this, or they seek to understand this for purposes of making sure that then they gauge the country in terms of its position financially. And 56 die in Sudan's army fight, a story captured on page 22 on the world page. It's quite unfortunate, the kind of animosity that we witness in Sudan, and as reports are coming, it is not getting any better, and IGAD calling upon them to seize this form of or perhaps to tone, or perhaps talk of a ceasefire in relation to quelling the kind of animosity that sits in Sudan. And therefore, it's a developing story. We'll be following up to see what really then needs to be done to quell this form of, instability that is being witnessed in the country. Not even Jesus could rescue Arsenal. It's been quite unfortunate, a report there. And I was just reading through the status of, the fans of Arsenal. You can almost laugh even as you sympathize with them as to what is playing out. Return of caning teachers go rogue, whereas corporal punishment is banned in school. Cases of learners and being beaten to a point of seeking medical attention are rising. Could the tutors be taking matters into their own hands at the peril of the learners? A story captured on page 11, 12, and 13, a comprehensive report in relation to that. This even, we are at a point where we said we have toned on corporal punishment. What could be informing this? What form of hunger would that be? We have not received the best of reports, last week and the previous times, and so definitely there is need to look into this matter. This, as we talk of a bit of politics, Azimio to report Gachagua to ICC as well, and I have said as well, or as we have read on the Daily Nation, there's also that very story in relation to the International Criminal Court case and that letter that was presented by the Azimio team to the Hague-based court to address what played out during the Maandamano Mondays and Thursdays, and the relationship, or the hand of the police in terms of how best or how they handled it. Of course, the IG saying that he will not be cowed and that he has done this in relation to, of course, the mandate that was accorded to him by the people of Kenya, using the very same instruments that the taxpayer then funds, and therefore he says that he is within his right as the police boss to have conducted such for purposes of protecting the Kenyans. We'll be following up on the same. To follow up this, also an unfortunate story. 11 cult members face attempted suicide charge. A story captured on page 5. I think it's been making headlines for the better part of the week in relation to this church. That is the Good News International, where then Mackenzie is said to be the pastor and, just getting his followers to starve to death in the name of, worship. And so as well, something that is ongoing, a developing story, will be getting you updates on the same. This in the world of sports, Eliud Kipchoge hopes Boston will favor him, as well as a story captured on page 31. We only constantly continue to wish our sports men and women athletes all the best as they carry the flag of the country high. Those are the key stories. Let's see whether we have anything on the daily, the People Daily. Read now. Let's see. Hey, here we go. 56 die as Sudan army paramilitary unit clash, world leaders worry. A story captured on page 17 as well that we've looked at. And on this other side, Kenyans abroad send home 48 billion in 1 month, says CBK. But even, with all these remittances, just how much, is it coming in to make sure that we have the best? And also, as they come back home, then this is money that was worth sending, while amount represents a 15% jump in remittances from 41.6 billion sent in February, with the US being the leading source of funds workers wire to relatives. And as well, it's one area that needs to be looked into, and perhaps the country to understand how best they can tap into these remittances for purposes of development. How schools put students at risk. As well, there's a story captured on the front page of the People Daily, speaks of the deaths of learners and teacher at Mukumu, sparking health and safety fears. As well, tutors and parents speak out on what must be done to reduce exposure to schools. And lastly, the closing institutions likely to cause spread of disease, as of course legislatures warn. And so we'll be following up keenly to update you on what plays out in relation to the same. Full reports on page 4, and that is editorial page 10. On this other side, Azimio leader Raila Odinga addresses a rally at the Kamkunji grounds, as you have evidently seen, and they say that they will certainly resume these processes of maandamano concurrently, as of course the bipartisan talks continue, so that failure of them admitting or getting to have their grievances addressed, then definitely it will not be all good in the country until this happens. Kipchoge eyes new record in Boston race. Of course, nothing but the best we wish him. And on this other side, Gachagua and police boss must face the ICC. This is according to the Right Honorable Raila Odinga. Those are the key stories that's captured, and definitely the stories that we'll be focusing on this morning. So keep tweeting, keep sending us your comments in relation to the same. I'll be sampling them as I loop in the gentlemen that help us decipher on the same. Allow us to quickly look at some of the stories that we have prepared. And that Health CS Susan Nahumicha has urged county government to have an urgent sit down with health workers unions in order to avert a looming strike. And speaking in Mombasa County, Nahumicha has called on the Health Human Resource Advisory Council to work together with the 47 county governments in order to find a long-lasting solution to the health workers' issues. Nakhumicha says the strike could easily paralyze the health sector and should therefore not be allowed to happen. Further, the CS says the ongoing issue between health workers and the Ministry of Health is in no way a poor reflection on devolution, but an opportunity to straighten out any grievances between the two parties.
Between the counties and the doctors, because they're the ones who are employing them. Even the CBS that you see, most of them have been signed by their respective counties. That notwithstanding, it is not all gloom and dull. Now we want to operationalize the Kenya Health Human Resource Advisory Council, so that then it takes up the role of mediation, it takes up the role of being able to take care of doctors across without clawing back on the benefits of devolution. In the country, we have some people practicing as medical professionals, yet they are not. And that's the main reason why we are here, that this institution, we have an institution that is supposed to be licensing practitioners, So it is that institution to step up in terms of being able to walk through the country and ensure that everybody who is practicing is licensed. And if they find somebody who is practicing and not licensed, then they should be able to close down and crack down on that person. Yes, and not just in Garissa, but across the country. And as you are aware, the Kenya Kwanza Manifesto gives a focus that we are moving from curative to preventive and promotive health services. Preventive and promotive is where we focus on things like hygiene and sanitation. Most of these diarrhea cases is because we are not taking care of the base of the health sector. We are taking care of the top. So when we focus now and focus on prevention and promotive, ensure that the health standards, the sanitation is done, even in the schools that we're experiencing issues. If only...
Now, 56 people have reportedly lost their lives, with at least 590 others nursing injuries in Sudan, according to the Doctors' Union in the country. In the second day of the clashes Sunday, the Sudan Army Forces used airstrikes in the rapid support forces and with external players like UN, IGAD, USA, China, Kenya, Egypt, and South Sudan calling for peace dialogue. However, the SAF has stated that it will not engage in dialogue until the RSF is dissolved.
Sudan's democracy is seemingly hanging in the balance as the top brass in the Sovereign Council leadership continues to flex their arsenal in major parts of the country. A situation that has seen 56 people lose their lives as at least 590 others nurse their injuries, according to a statement by the Central Committee of Sudan Doctors. In the second day of the clashes between the country's Army Chief General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan,
wakati mwingine kama weekend mimi najiachilia
hata ukumbuki history.
Nikifika watu wangu wakinipokea na kupokeleka,
umeset the mood,
nimeset the mood, naweza kupokeleka. Nikitumai kwamba mzima popote pale ulipo, nikikukaribisha katika kipindi Mfahamu Kiongozi. Jina langu Elizabeth Mutuku. Katika kipindi Mfahamu Kiongozi tunakupa nafasi kutangamana nao kila siku ya Alhamisi kuanzia saa 1:30 kuendelea siku nyingine. Tutapatana papa hapa umjue kiongozi mwingine.
Jiunge nasi toka hapa hadi ufuoni mwa bahari. Meli yetu itakapotua nanga kwa uhondo ribo ya riwaya hii mwisho wa kosa. Monica.
It's early morning in Maralal. Start your morning informed, educated, entertained, and above all, know your country. From the beautiful plains of Samburu County to the skyscrapers of Nairobi, Morning Cafe certainly got you covered. Indeed, a beautiful place to watch and certainly a moment of understanding and knowing your country. Indeed, to the remotest parts of every county. Join me, Linda Alela, every weekday from 6 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
The diversity of Kenya's wildlife has garnered international fame.
This is pellets that we give to the tourists, the giraffes. We ration because we don't want the giraffes to eat too much of this. We want them to have more of the natural browse.
We may not always get the opportunity to go out to see the wildlife, but you'll never miss the opportunity to see it from the comfort of your couch.
This is home to animals that have been found out there either injured, abandoned, or confiscated from people who are holding them illegally.
Only on TV47 Wildlife, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m.
According to the eyewitnesses, the fire started at around midnight and could not be noticed because no alarm was raised until a driver of a passing vehicle noticed that there was a house on fire and started hooting, thus waking up neighbors who raised the alarm.
Ikafanyika usiku wa manane about na saa 6:30 kukawa na an alarm na tukasikia duru sisi wenyeji. Mimi nikiwa neighbor niliposikia nikatokea nje niangalia, ikawa ni kwa sababu gani, pengine sababu ilienda dakika chache. Nilipotoka kwangu nikaona moto mkubwa sana penye sasa tuko.
Mr. James Kamira Karanja, a neighbor, was woken up by consistent hooting of the vehicle and noticed the raging fire in the neighborhood and immediately raised alarm, including calling the fire brigade, who were unable to respond immediately because there was station far from the area.
Nikaingia ndani ya nyumba nikachukua simu nikajaribu kupigia watu wa fire brigade through the police. Kwa neema ya Mwenyezi Mungu tukampata OCS wetu akawasiliana na watu wa municipality in charge of the fire brigade. Unfortunately, to our disappointment, tulielewa baadaye ya kwamba hatuna fire brigade yenye imeletwa Githunguri kama jinsi governor aliyopotuambia wakati tulikuwa na participation ya Githunguri municipality proposals. Ati fire brigade yenye ingelikuwa kuja kutusaidia ingelitoka Loiro. It was very much unfortunate. Tulipigana na hiyo moto about 30 minutes plus.
Ni hii moto hawange kufa. Na kama kumekuwa na fire brigade hapa karibu, ingekuja na isaidie kuzima hii moto kwa haraka na hawangeumia ama kukufa. So tuna huzuni sana kwa kupoteza. Tunaomba gavana wetu atupee hiyo fire brigade hapa karibu iwe inasaidia kwa hii kijiji. Asante.
MCA Githunguri Ward. Tumepata janga la moto hapa ya Githunguri, kijiji inaitwa Gateway. Tuko na shida sana pande ya Githunguri Ward sababu ya kukosa gari ya kuzima moto. Mnapo jana usiku tulipata hii janga la moto. Kulikuwa na vijana wawili walikuwa wamelala katika hii nyumba, na wakati tulijaribu kufikia watu wa fire walitobia gari Koroiro na wanafanya juhudi ifike hapa Githunguri. Haikufika na moto ilizimwa na wakazi wa hapa na hatukupata hata gari haikufika hapa. Tunafanya request ama tunafanya hii demand tupate gari ya moto hapa Githunguri, sababu jaga kama hizi tumezipata kwa muda wa miezi 3 na hakuna mahali tunakuja kusaidika.
Amida Yakub, TV47.
Now, Baringo County leaders are calling for a one-on-one meeting with President William Ruto to discuss the ongoing banditry attacks that have brought unrest to the region. The leaders made the request during an interdenominational service for peaceful prayers in Baringo South, where they criticized the Inspector General of Police for failing to act on orders to eliminate the bandits responsible for the violence, calling it a disgrace, as Norbert Odur details.
Baringo County leaders are growing increasingly frustrated with the continuous banditry attacks in their regions, and now they want to engage with the president directly.
Njia moja tu tutafutie sisi njia ya kwenda ona hii rais yetu. Tafadhalini, mimi naomba nyinyi, mtu yeyote ile ambaye iko uwezo ya kumpa sisi nafasi ya kwenda ona rais,
they lashed out at the Inspector General of Police for allegedly not implementing orders to flush out bandits in the region who continue to wreak havoc in the area.
Lakini ningependa kuomba IG wetu watumie mbinu yote wewe uko na DCI, wewe uko na NSIS, uko na intelligence yote, hata kama ni military intelligence tunaweza kuwapata. Tunataka wafanye uchunguzi waweze kupata wale ambao wanapanga hii maneno.
Mochongoi Ward Member of County Assembly Kipruto Kimosop was among those who criticized the Inspector General of Police. He says that the bandit attacks have caused a lot of pain to the people of Baringo and it's time for the government to take a decisive action.
Mbona juzi wakati Raila alifuruka Nairobi, wewe ulitoa ukali sana kwa Raila. Ukatoa macho, ukasema uogopi ICC. Mbona usikuja hapa utoe hiyo ukali, utolee bandits na utusaidie kufanyia bandits operation.
Baringo South Member of Parliament Charles Kamuren claimed that the government will deploy 100 national police reservists as an immediate measure to address insecurity in Baringo South and Baringo North.
Wale wanaohusika wote muanze operation, saa ile mnachukua pinduki hii ya wakora. Hata wale wako ofisini muanze tusikie kwamba mmeanza kushika hawa na mnavuata hawa. Kwa sababu wako maofisi. Nataka muanzie Baringo County. Wale wakora wako wanafanya kazi kwa kaunti yetu. Wale wana support hii ulakai. Waanze.
The insecurity situation in Baringo County has reached alarming levels, with the recent incident being last week Wednesday, where bandits shot one person dead and drove away 77 herds of cattle. The situation was further compounded when the bandits shot dead a peace ambassador Collins Kwanyiko after he questioned them as to why they keep on raiding and bringing animosity among the people of Baringo, thus forcing the local leaders to call for an urgent meeting with the president. The leaders were speaking in Baringo South today during an interdenomination service to pray for peace. Norbert Odur, TV 47.
Now, the death toll in the accident that occurred along the Mwatate-Wundanyi Road is shooting up. This is after bus victims were traveling in lost control, or the bus that lost control and rolled over before landing on a ditch at the Joshua Black Spot in Taita Taveta County. And as Andrin Kilemi reports, the passengers were mourners who were traveling to Mombasa from Mgamboni, where they had attended a burial ceremony.
This is what remains of the public service bus that crashed in the 8 p.m. incident. The passengers were coming from a burial ceremony in Mgamboni, Wundanyi sub-county. Their journey came to an abrupt halt at the Joshua Black Spot area of Taita Taveta County, as 5 people died on the spot, with the death toll now standing at 10. Survivors of the accident say the driver lost control of the bus that was ferrying at least 34 mourners. It is believed that the bus developed some mechanical problems, losing its brakes and rolling over several times before landing into a ditch.
Ya kwanza alifaulu kupiga, ya pili pia kafaulu kupiga, ya tatu kafaulu kupiga, lakini ile ya nne ilimsumbua akashindwa kuregesha gari, ikaanguka upande wa right hand side. Hakuweza kuiregesha barabarani kwa sababu alikuwa speed. Na gari ilikuwa na watu wengine walikuwa wamesimama juu. Sijui kama kule nyuma kulikuwa kuna nafasi ya viti ama kuna, lakini watu walikuwa wamesimama watatu.
Speaking at Moi County Referral Hospital, Taita Taveta County Governor Andrew Mwadime called upon the Kenya National Highway Authority KENHA to look for a permanent solution, as the area, which has been termed as a black spot, has claimed many lives.
Waliotuacha ni watu 10, wawili wakiwa wanaume na 8 wakiwa kina mama. Na naomba wananchi, wakati wa tukio kama hili, sote tuwe kitu kimoja, kama ule mfano watu walionyesha jana baada ya hii ajali.
According to the latest report by the National Transport and Safety Authority NTSA, 1,072 people have died on our Kenyan roads since January this year. 362 of those are pedestrians, 302 are motorcyclists, 184 are passengers, 101 are pillion passengers, 104 are drivers, while 19 are pedal cyclists. The report further shows that Machakos County recorded the highest number of driver fatalities, with most accidents happening along the Nairobi-Mombasa highway. Nakuru and Meru had the highest number of motorcyclist and pillion passenger fatalities at 33 and 30 deaths respectively, while Nairobi and Kiambu had the highest number of pedestrian fatalities at 56 and 45 deaths respectively. Motorcycles and private vehicles have contributed to the highest number of fatalities at 284 and 272 deaths respectively. The NTSA report indicates that the majority of those who died from road accidents were men at 83%, a situation which was attributed to risky behavior on the roads and distracted driving or walking and riding in the wrong areas of the road. Andrin Kilemi, TV 47.
Now, President William Ruto has challenged the opposition to end the conversation on elections and instead champion the interests of the people. Ruto says it is not fair that after elections, politicians drag citizens back to issues relating to elections and leaders. Flora Limuki tells us more.
As the government and the opposition exchange words in public before the bipartisan approach talks commence, revelations that the government has tried to woo some members of the opposition continue to make headlines.
Hata kama unatafuta haki yako kama kiongozi, unavunja mali ya wananchi kwa nini? Unalete fujo kwa wananchi kwa nini? Unalete vita kwa wananchi kwa nini? Unaharibu biashara ya wananchi kwa sababu gani?
You have no business in the streets. You have no business destroying property. You have no business putting sufurias on your head. And the Kamba people cannot follow a leader who destroys property because it's against what the Kamba nation believes in.
A section of leaders from the Kambani region has also pledged its support to President William Ruto and his administration in a bid to equally gain on development projects. The regionals for a long time supported the opposition due to the relationship between Wiper leader Kalonzo Musyoka and opposition chief Raila Odinga.
Zote tumekataa mambo ya maandamano na sote tumesema siasa za mtoto wetu tuache, tuseme rais wetu ni Dr. Ruto.
Na sisi tuko tayari kuendelea na wewe, na viongozi wengine pia wamejitokeza, tumeshikana. Kwa hivyo ukija Ukambani usione kama hauna support ama support yako ni kidogo.
Machakos Governor Wavinya Ndeti openly downplaying the ongoing demonstrations by the opposition, saying that she is only interested in development for our people.
Hii Kenya ni kubwa kushinda sisi wote. It is bigger than all of us. And if talking is going to give us peace, and so be it.
It's a good thing to do, to speak, to dialogue, because we want the peace and we want development.
With anticipated bipartisan talks to forge a way forward for the ruling government and the opposition, Kitui East Member of Parliament Nimrod Mbai says they won't accept a handshake as the Kenya Kwanza leadership.
Sisi tunamshikilia kabisa na nguvu yetu yote. Asikubali hii kitu.
And we join you and we join the church in calling on all leaders in our country that we make every effort to ensure that there is peace and mutual edification in our country.
The president has appealed to leaders to unite and work together to confront challenges facing Kenyans. Flora Limuki, TV 47.
Inspector General of Police Japhet Koome has responded to Azimio-Kenya Kwanza's threat to take him to The Hague, while maintaining that law and order must be maintained in the case the opposition plans to take to the streets. Koome has cautioned that the National Police Service shall not allow lawlessness in the country amid another call for protests by Azimio-Kenya Kwanza after the end of Ramadan. Moige William with more details on this.
Inspector General of Police Japhet Koome has reiterated the police tough stance on demonstrators who disrupt the peace of innocent citizens. Koome, who has been singled out by the Azimio-Kenya Kenya coalition as the person responsible should any harm come to Azimio supporters, has not minced his words. This comes in the wake of Azimio's drafted letter addressed to the International Criminal Court, calling for its intervention to probe the conduct of the National Police Service during earlier protests in the country. Koome further revealed that the Azimio's leadership had followed due process in notifying the police of the intended Sunday activities. The coalition party held its first public baraza at Kamukunji ground Sunday, days after suspending their weekly Monday and Thursday protest. Unlike in previous scenarios, the police allowed the Azimio leadership to address its supporters, marking a stark difference in their approach.
Wakaandikia OCS Shauri Moyo, wakamwambia watakutana pale, na tumekubali, na tutawapatia usalama, wasungumuze mambo yao. Lakini yale yalikuwa yanafanyika kule nyuma, mnajua ilikuwa ni mass action. Mass action. Kwa sheria hatuna jambo kama hilo.
However, Koome was quick to caution Azimio and its supporters against any kind of lawlessness or unrest at their functions, emphasizing that law enforcement officers will be on standby to uphold their law.
Lakini wakijaribu, yeyote atajaribu kuharibu mali, yeyote atajaribu kutishia maisha ya Mkenya mwenzake, hapo nitakuja hapo na nitatumia vifaa zote ambazo nimepewa na Wakenya. Si kununua mimi mwenyewe hivi vifaa. Wakenya ndio wamenunulia mimi hivi vifaa, tear gas, bunduki. Ni Wakenya wamenunulia, ndio ni walinde.
Regarding Azimio's call for protest after Ramadan, Koome took issue with the opposition and their plans, stating that the National Police Service will protect the lives and property of all Kenyans regardless of their social status.
Mimi sitaruhusu hata Mkenya mmoja afe. Sitakubali. I will have slept on the job as the Inspector General. Ntalinda mdogo na mkubwa, na nimesema bila woga na bila kutishwa.
He further called on police officers to discharge their duties without fear or favor, as they have a duty to serve the nation. Mwige William, TV 47.
Karibu sana. Pete.
Thank you.
Wakati mwingine kama weekend, mimi najiachilia.
Hata ukumbuki hii story.
Nikifika watu wangu wakinipokea na kupokeleka.
Umeset the mood.
Nimeset the mood. Naweza kupokeleka. Nikitumai kwamba mzima popote pale ulipo, nikikukaribisha katika kipindi Mfahamu Kiongozi. Jina langu Elizabeth Mutuku. Katika kipindi Mfahamu Kiongozi tunakupa nafasi kutangamana nao kila siku ya Alhamisi kuanzia saa 1:30 kuendelea siku nyingine. Tutapatana papa hapa umjue kiongozi mwingine.
Jiunge nasi toka hapa hadi ufuoni mwa bahari. Meli yetu itakapotua nanga kwa uhondo ribo ya riwaya hii mwisho wa kosa. Monica.
It's early morning in Maralal. Start your morning informed, educated, entertained, and above all, know your country. From the beautiful plains of Samburu County to the skyscrapers of Nairobi, Morning Cafe certainly got you covered. Indeed, a beautiful place to watch and certainly a moment of understanding and knowing your country. Indeed, to the remotest parts of every county.
Join me, Linda Alela, every weekday from 6 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
The diversity of Kenya's wildlife has garnered international fame.
This is pellets that we give to the tourists, the giraffes. We ration because we don't want the giraffes to eat too much of this. We want them to have more of the natural browse.
We may not always get the opportunity to go out to see the wildlife, but you'll never miss the opportunity to see it from the comfort of your couch.
This is home to animals that have been found out there either injured
abandoned or confiscated from people who are holding them illegally.
Only on TV47 Wildlife, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m.
Disability is a club that anyone can join.
I live with special needs. It means I have a limitation. There are things I can't be able to do personally myself.
And in our journey to talk about disability, we tell the stories of those with disabilities and even sit with specialists to understand what it means for those affected directly and indirectly.
Everybody's life, mine has also been faced with ups and downs.
If it becomes a self-stigmatized thing where you feel like you are judging yourself too harsh, you blame yourself, and you perceive that it happened because you failed.
Join me, Zainab Mohammed, on Beyond the Limit every Saturday at 7:30 p.m.
An entrepreneur is defined as someone who has the ability and desire to establish, administer, and succeed in a startup venture along with the risks entitled to it to make profits.
I'm a professional financier with a professional paper in banking. However, for fashion, it's something I've always loved ever since I was small.
It started as a baby business. It was all about, you have your machines, the haircuts, wear the heads, bring the scalps.
We wanted something that would remind us about prayer every now and then. So the moment you mention Talit, we always think about prayer because Talit Cakes is founded on prayer.
Get to learn more about these entrepreneurs and what makes them stand out in their field every Monday at 6:30 p.m. only on The Grind.
The Realtor, this is where we travel, move far and wide just to make sure that we bring you what it all entails when it comes to matters real estate.
Buying off plan is the best thing that you can do because it gets to be a journey that is even affordable and flexible.
Visit there, go down, go see what kind of production they do, what varieties do they have, what color preferences do they have.
Quality assurance is supposed to be a way of checking that the materials have really gone through tests as required.
The Realtor, every Tuesday.
All right, welcome back to the broadcast. Before I loop in the gentlemen that joined me for the conversation, let's pick this story. Azimio leader Raila Odinga has announced his intention to take Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, that is to the International Criminal Court, ICC, over an alleged assassination attempt. Raila alleged that the government had sent police, of course, to target his convoy on these moments of maandamano. Let's take a look at that.
As the debate on whether or not the International Criminal Court ICC should intervene in the current political crisis in the country, Azimio la Umoja has added to its list individuals it wants prosecuted by the court. Azimio leader Raila Odinga now announcing his intention to take Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua to ICC in light of an alleged assassination attempt.
Bwana Gacheta vile vile tunamshtaki. He is also an accused. Jina yake iliwacha tu kwanza wiki hii. Kesho jina yake nakwenda kwa ICC.
Speaking at Azimio la Umoja rally on Sunday held at Kamukonje grounds, Raila claimed that Gachagua had orchestrated the attack by sending police officers who fired 11 bullets at his car during mass protests that took place on March 27th and 30th.
Yeye mwenyewe alisema ati wanataka kumaliza baba once and for all, sio? Na yeye alituma ile askari kutoka Sugoi kuja kuniua. Jamaa amempiga gari yangu risasi 11. Mpiga gari yangu Sasa hiyo bado gari iko kama exhibit.
According to Raila, the officers initially used tear gas on his vehicle during the protest, and when he took cover to avoid the gas, they fired bullets at his car.
Tuko na dawa yake. Tutampeleka yeye Hague. Gachagua tunapeleka Hague. Na wale maaskari ambao walipiga watu wetu na risasi, tuna majina yao yote. Kesho yote tunapeleka huko Hague.
On April 14, Azimio led by lawyer Paul Mwangi sent a letter to the ICC requesting the court to initiate investigations into the political situation in Kenya. The letter, submitted in accordance with Regulation 25 of the Regulation of the Office of the Prosecutor, highlighted 9 issues including targeted attacks on protesters. Meanwhile, the Azimio leadership has termed the inclusion of Eldas constituency legislator Adan Keynan in Kenya Kwanza's bipartisan team as disrespectful.
Utakijua kwamba hao watu wana madharau. Wanachukua mmoja wetu ambaye alikuwa ameruka mpaka kaenda ngambo ile nyingine, anaitwa Bwana Kenan,
ya kwamba hatutarudi nyuma mpaka tupate haki yetu.
On Wednesday, the United Democratic Alliance said that the party's decision to involve Kenan in the talks was intentional and aimed at promoting the inclusion of all political parties. The Eldas Member of Parliament is a member of the Jubilee Party, which is a part of the Azimio-Kenya coalition, and is among Jubilee members who defected from Azimio and pledged to work with Kenya Kwanza after the August 9 polls. Odinga threatened to mobilize his supporters back to the streets for anti-government protest after Ramadan if their demands will not be met by then.
Tumesema hayo ni masharti yetu ya mazungumzo. Hao yote mpaka ziwe agenda kwa mazungumzo. Na hiyo mazungumzo vile vile hatutaki ikae milele na milele. Tumesema ni siku 30. Hiyo siku 30 tulianza kuhesabu wiki jana.
The countrywide public barazas were halted on April 1st to pave the way for bipartisan talks, following the commencement of mass protests on March 20th. Azimio also wants the Kenya Kwanza government to lower the cost of living, open IEBC servers for forensic analysis of the poll results, respect of democracy and equal representation of all communities in the government. Mike Kagwongo, TV 47, Nairobi.
All right, and we now get to the conversation. A bit of an echo, but that should be fixed. Honorable Martin Wanyonyi, Member of Parliament, Webuye East, is with us this morning. And right next to Martin and next to me, sandwiched, is Kevin Osido, governance expert, as well as the Executive Director, County Governance Watch. Thank you so much for creating time to be with us. After a very long time, ulipotelea wapi?
Wanasema mambo ni mengi.
Masaa ndio machache.
Masaa ndio machache. And so there's a lot of work to be done, particularly on our leadership and governance issues. So when you begin to do research, there's something we call imbibing yourself in books.
Okay.
So I had imbibed myself.
You had imbibed yourself.
Then I went home to plant maize and beans because God has blessed us with the rains.
Yeah, that's true. And nasikia watu wa Azimio wanaambiwa badala ya kupiga kelele huko, waende wakapande, si ndio?
Hawajapeana.
Watu wapande ama namna gani?
Hawajapeana nini fertilizers.
Mjapata fertilizer hiyo hapo?
Hazijafika.
Hiyo ya subsidized.
Hakuna.
Are you serious?
Hakuna.
Lakini unajua pia huko kwenyu, are you really farmers like as such? Maybe they've looked at regions where labda watu wakulima tu sana ama?
No, yeah. In Siaya County, particularly where I come from, we have plenty of agricultural production that is taking place, particularly for maize, sorghum, and millet. Initially, it used to be cotton.
Yeah.
But these days people are diversifying because of lack of government investment in production of cotton. So as a farmer, you have your large bulk of cotton, but there is no market. Sometimes even what you need to be able to boost the cotton, particularly talk about things like fertilizers for cotton, talk about resources to be able to weed, to prepare that cotton is also not there. So people have more or less given up in produce
that were considered as
that
cash
were
crops
considered
and all
as
that.
exactly, and they are now getting into planting cash crop, not cash crops, but food crops.
Food crops,
and
yeah.
and they're not necessarily for sale or for what I would call for market. They're just for consumption.
Food consumption,
Yeah.
and that's quite unfortunate. And I mean, these are some of the industries that were booming then: the cotton industry, the sugar industry. We still are looking to see how the Kenya Kwanza government intends to revive them. Mheshimiwa, I am assuming, or perhaps I am sure, that fertilizer imefika Webuye.
Of course, Western Kenya is the
Food basket, you want to say? Well, perhaps, those sides, I mean, Kitale largely, yeah.
Our region is the food basket of the Republic of Kenya.
Okay.
And we must say, we must really thank the government because so far, so good. We've received the subsidized fertilizer. And you remember around 3 months ago, we had a national prayer day to pray for rains, and we thank God that indeed He answered our prayers. I know
But why are you laughing? And it's very I mean, they're rains.
okay.
Why is giving a video laughing?
To pray after us.
Yeah.
We had our prayers. So I think really, I'm happy that I was home last week, and many people are now planting, and so we are hoping that this year we are going to have a bumper harvest, and that's why, while we are thanking government for importing cheap maize, we are also hoping by August we will stop this importation, and so that then our maize that we'll have harvested will have a good price at the end of the day. So I think, the problem with Siaya, they are banning and destroying everything government. You remember that time they banned UD offices, they banned, they almost reached the CS ICT.
Yeah.
So we are even worried if fertilizer, taking their fertilizer, it would be safe. So
I thought you people were celebrating the other time, saying that, even the Nyanza region is now accepting, that there's a wind of change and accepting the Kenya Kwanza team and, lauding them for welcoming the president and the deputy and all that. So
that was the case.
Yeah.
Actually, for us, we thought initially they had accepted, they had moved on, until and after this Mandamano thing started. But initially, actually, we were in good terms, and they had impressed William Samuel Ruto. We had even, President was there, he had initiated many development projects, many beyond even what he's doing in my own county, in my own region. So, and again, after a very short time, we started hearing the Mandamano, banning of offices, banning of eating of foods, of meetings. So I think really is unfortunate, but we are hoping that it will calm down, and we'll agree to move forward as a country so that the president will have time to develop each and every part of this country. Because we, as we said anyway, yes, we campaigned as Kenya Kwanza, but now William Samoei Ruto is the president of the Republic of Kenya.
Yeah.
Whether you voted for him or you did not vote for him, he has a responsibility under the constitution, morally, legally, to be able to develop even Nyanza itself, even when he did not really vote for him.
And there's a general feeling from the Kenya Kwanza side that beyond the Azimio team, there is a crop of Kenyans that are really not, in acceptance of the existence of a new regime, and perhaps they're not willing to work with the new regime for the benefit of the people of Kenya. And I think that's basically what it is that Mheshimiwa speaks to. Don't you think that that is our greatest undoing in terms of realizing the best of any regime that comes on board? Because constantly, because perhaps of our political affiliation, because of the question of tribe, we tend to, refuse to accept the existence of a regime that is there to work with them for purposes of posterity.
That's purely correct. And the undoing is to those who do not believe in the existence of a government, especially given the kind of process that Kenyans go through to be able to have a government in place. Of course, the context is that the 2022 elections were contested, and we've had conversations with the Supreme Court, including different and divergent views and opinions. regarding how the judgment of the Supreme Court was passed or how it was discharged. But I don't think that that should be able to bar anyone from engaging with the government in office, and particularly given the fact that, one, it is your taxes actually that are putting them in office, and then two, that they have a duty as a government to deliver services. Now, if you go back very many years ago, then you begin to delve into issues around the historical developments of our politics and of our government and of our governance, where, for example, there are certain parts of this country that have been more or less zoned off as opposition zones, and probably the area that we are talking about, Siaya and others, only that Siaya people didn't eat the food. Yeah, that was happening in Kisumu. so maybe people are of this opinion that
Kisumu and Kisumu is Siaya.
Yeah, of course, you can probably imagine that. Yeah? So the imagination is that if a few people, or when a few people are opposing government, then the entire region is therefore demonized to be an opposition zone, whereas I don't think that it is. Somebody like Kevin Osido, I don't buy everything that Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga says, and I also do not eat everything that the government says and does. But if you, and that is for very many reasons. Yeah. But moving forward, progressively, Linda and Mheshimiwa, we now have county governments. So whether you don't believe with the national in the national government, why don't you therefore begin to have concerns around your county government and participate and engage and ask questions and attend those meetings and look at what value you can add as an individual depending on your skills, your expertise, your experience, and look for a space within which you can be able to engage. Because fact of the matter is that a government in office is a government in place. So, and if you want to take off that government, there are procedures and processes, part of which Azimio is trying to do, but I think a lot of that is purely overtaken by events, which is probably why we might need an extra constitutional or extra legal process, which I have continuously called highest level of political goodwill. And that is purely discussions between two contending parties. And at the individual level is to ask yourself, why don't you believe in the government? And then find a reason for curing the reason as to why you don't believe in a government. But as I finish on this, Linda, is to reiterate on what Mheshimiwa has said. The government also needs to do more to be able to encourage divergent and opposing views and zones, so that they are seen to be as magnanimous enough to be able to also be seen to be working for the people. And I think that's partly why the late President Moi was very successful to be able to even rule this country. Let me call it rule Kenya for 24 plus years. President Moi would pick a phone call and call the least person in the village and ask them, how are you people doing? And, and through that, he was able to get information, gather a lot of intelligence, and therefore he knew how to respond to the divergent views and opinions, which I don't think any other post-President Moi governments have been very successful.
What has it that the current president is adopting that kind of style? Could you confirm that, having worked with him? Are there instances that he will talk to you direct to understand what is happening with your constituents? Or perhaps you go back home and, some of your constituents or the leadership down there tells you, what, even the president called to ask this and that. It seems to be, a holding grip of the country, the Moi style. It's just that maybe people are not giving him time to that.
I think Linda, there's nobody dangerous like somebody who was schooled in primary school, in a political primary school by Moi, and he went to a secondary school of Raila Amolo Odinga.
So dangerous in a good way or dangerous in a bad way? Are you scaring us?
That's the most astute,
dangerous politician.
That's the most dangerous politician in the Republic of Kenya, and that's William Samoei Ruto. Ruto has been taught by both Moi and Raila Odinga. And that's why today, Raila is unable to manage William Samoei Ruto.
Is he?
Because he is his student.
Okay.
And so, of course, William has been in government, or rather as president for the last, I think, 7 months or so. But I can assure you, if there's any person today whose success has come because of engaging even the least person at the grassroots is William Samoei Ruto. Yes, Moi did it, but Ruto is overdoing it. I can tell you during our campaign, I'm so sure since the inception of the Republic of Kenya, we've never had a presidential candidate campaigning in the even smallest markets, a market with even only one market, one structure. William was there campaigning, and that's why we're able to really win against Raila Odinga, because we went to the people.
Is that what makes you say that the president or the right noble Raila Odinga can't even manage the president?
Actually,
has not been able to.
Look at Raila's campaigns. Raila was only campaigning in these big towns. In a week, he was only having around 5 rallies. We were doing almost 6 to 7 rallies in a day, in the deep end of our community, of our set, of our markets, and engaging each and every person. I can tell. I remember even in my own constituency, we did rallies in the places where people could not imagine that William will be there. And while Raila, I remember, his rallies were only in Webuye town, and he tried to come to my market. I remember he came in there around 6 p.m. very late. And it rained. He was unable even to come. He was unable to campaign and hold a rally. So I think really, and that's why, to be honest, William Samuel Ruto is embraced and liked by the grassroots, just because of how directly he's engaging them and is working with them. How do you imagine that today? Even me myself, of course, now I'm a member of parliament. By that time, I was a member of the county assembly. But he used to call me. There was a time I was with my son chief during campaigns, and the president called him.
Okay.
He called him to ask him how things are and how is the campaigns. So I can tell you, in due course, William Samuel Ruto will be, even in terms of engaging the people and working close with the people, will be better many times than Moi. And so, but I'm happy also Kevin here. He's also appreciating the fact that we have a government in place and led by William Samuel. I'm hoping that he can take this message to his own people and to his own kingpin to really appreciate.
They know. I hope
that we need to move on. We need to move on. No, honestly, we cannot be in this state.
At the
detriment of the people of Kenya.
At the expense of, sanity in the electoral process, at the expense of democracy, we need to move on, Kevin Osido?
Linda, we will have to move on, but move on very carefully. Because remember that 2017 and 2022 elections have had serious challenges, particularly when it comes to the reforms that different processes have had to be put in place to deal with. And one of those reforms, particularly in special reference to 2017, is remember the Joint Parliamentary Committee that was chaired by Mheshimiwa James Orengo and then Senator Governor Kiraitu, that was able to bring up issues that really tried to deal with certain questions that people had, borrowing or coming from 2013, where Kenyans were told, Kenyans who were not in government were told accept and move on. The challenge with our processes is that we more or less treat them like instant coffee mechanisms, where we look at the challenge and we put a few people in some corner to deal with it. They make proposals on how they are going to deal with it. Then we put people in office and we move on. Now, one of those issues, which is the current call that we are seeing, is opening the servers. Now, the question is, but how do you open the servers, particularly in the view that IEBC told us we opened the servers at Bomas? What is it that suddenly you have that you did not present at the Supreme Court, and therefore that will warrant or demand us to push for the opening of servers? Now, moving further to that is to ask the question, so do we have constitutional mechanisms? Do we have legal mechanisms? Do you have institutional structures? Do we have policies that even will be able to ensure that the calls, particularly from electoral injustice perspective, is put in place? And from where I am seated, the answer is actually yes, because constitutionally, Article 35 allows any Kenyan citizen to demand for information that is held by the state. And then you ask yourself, so what value of importance is that information? And beyond just asking yourself about the value, importance, or value addition of that particular information is, what is the process? So moving forward is to therefore ask ourselves, what are therefore the gaps or the lacuna that exist within processes that have been dealt with by the Supreme Court? Because by law, matters around presidential petitions are handled at the Supreme Court. And in this case, the Supreme Court, despite the fact that as Kevin and a Kenyan taxpayer have issues in the manner in which that particular case was handled and discharged, but the matter was already closed. So how do we now go back? And Azimio, in my view, has a very valid concern.
Okay.
You have information which is being held by the state, and that is addressed in Article 35. So how do we do it? Constitutionally, you meet the threshold. Now, moving forward is a legal mechanism. Is there a law or is there a mechanism that will be able to ensure that your prayer is granted? The answer is both yes and no. But now, the process is political in the manner in which it was an electoral petition which was already dispensed at the Supreme Court, which is why for me, what therefore we need to do is to ensure that we have political goodwill in the conversation. Because that political goodwill, ultimately you go back to the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court is the one that will be able to review the new evidence that you have. And I was at Ufungamano, by the way, Linda.
Yes, and I'd love for us to get into that, but of course we're getting to it shortly after we get the deliberations of Mheshimiwa in relation to them, of course, triggering this talk of a bipartisan talk.
Yeah, so let me just close therefore and say that we are moving on progressively well, but the challenge is that every time we have elections, we go back very many steps again. And so we need to find a way of bringing closure to the 2017 and the 2022 elections. And I think that the processes like the one that you are referring to are the kind of processes that will help us to be able to move on progressively.
All right, you appear to be willing to address this, but at the same time, you are, coming in with, just like the Azimio team, you have some level of, you're saying to this level we cannot discuss, to this level we can discuss. Why is it that then, if you're willing to have a conversation revolving around that, then you're putting caveat to it?
You see, Linda, we have accepted to have a conversation with Raila and his team just for the sake of the Republic of Kenya.
And you only want one matter to be addressed.
It's not because they
you
have
overlook
issues.
what it is that Kevin speaks of.
You see, we accepted to have this conversation for the sake of the Republic of Kenya. We love this country so much that you cannot see this country go down, being destroyed by one person. And that's why we accepted. But we know for a fact, there's no issues. When you're talking about the issue that Raila is raising, the issue of the opening of the server, he knows too well, Parliament cannot open the server. Server was opened by the directive of the Supreme Court. It was opened during the Raila's petition.
How open
the
was
Supreme
it?
Court. It was opened. Now, today they are demanding for this opening of the same. And they know too well that can only be done in the Parliament. That can only be done by a directive or order by the Supreme Court, which was done. The issue of IEBC, the same procedure that was used to put in place the selection panel. Is the same procedure that was used during the putting in place of the Cherera 4. The issue of the cost of living, already William Samuel is addressing. So I can tell you, we are in this because we love this country. And we are hoping that they're also coming into this with open mind, with open heart. But again, the way we are seeing, they're not genuine. They're not honest. They are insincere. That's why today, again, they're talking about now not having a parliamentary process. They want an extra parliamentary process. Yes, you ask yourself why. And yet the same parliamentary process allows these guys to be able to have a say and share their views through this process. The Article 10 of the Constitution provides clearly that whatever government does, there must be public participation. So that whatever they're talking about, this outside structure, outside parliament structure, can still raise their issues without having that structure through public participation in parliamentary team. So I think really it's a bit unfortunate that we are in this, but our prayer is that once we can now be able to deal with this only one person. I can tell you, leader, the issue is not that Kenyans have issues. Of course, they might have issues in terms of the cost of living, which we are addressing now. But the biggest problem that we are facing as Kenya is this one person who think he must be president for this country to move on.
And we will come to that. But we speak of political goodwill, yeah? The gentleman, gentlemen, you agree that there is need for political goodwill. He says the bipartisan approach is largely a political process, and yes, because it involves politicians. Perhaps to me, that then would sound as though it is political goodwill. There are some people who say then it's, the buck stops with the president and the Right Honorable Raila Odinga, these two gentlemen, then perhaps that would be the face of political goodwill. But Mfunga Mano, and I mean everybody that was there was largely advocating to, the need for the involvement of the public, and of course then you wear the face of the public in this very case. But then when you acknowledge very well that this requires political goodwill, then there's that desire and push to have public engagement in relation to the same. I mean, what exactly are we referring to? Because we know very well that in as much as the public is engaged and there's no political goodwill, then we're not getting anywhere. Why not allow the politicians to play this game and perhaps get us somewhere? Then in the event that they fail, then as the public, we can come in and say, now we are here and perhaps we're taking up this mantle to see to it what we can achieve, contrary to what it is that was achieved by the politician.
And Lena, that's a very good question. Hence the reason why there is this set of Kenyans that are therefore calling for an extra parliamentary process, otherwise what has been proposed as a multi-sectoral process. Because waiting for the politicians to finish up their game, then the whistle is blown and you retreat and then get the public back, takes time. And remember that already the government is moving on. Some of the issues that Kenyans are grappling with are actually biting them every day, like the cost of living. And so what therefore the multi-sectoral process would be seeking to do is to bring everyone on the table while leaving no one behind. In the view that you treat it more or less like the constitutional review process, the Bomas process that we saw every sector of the community and of the society being brought to the table and having their say, while probably you might not have your way. But what that therefore cures is also reviewing some of the calls that have been made by Azimio, because some of those calls are just calls. Achieving them might take 100 years, but that is purely based on the existing structures. So if you have people who speak from different angles, different voices, they also are able to present an agenda that is equally agreeable with and by everyone. Because what Azimio has presented is their own perspective around how things are going on, given their experiences being politicians, and particularly from the fact that they ran for different offices and that they have issues with the presidential vote. Now, if you bring it to the table where you have different sectors and different representatives of the population or the citizenry, then you already agree. You begin to agree on the core issues that need to be submitted, which, if taken to the politicians, might not be very possible, and we're already seeing that kind of tendency.
So what then is this that we're calling political goodwill?
Particularly from political goodwill, therefore, is what we saw from the president and the former prime minister, particularly where the president came and said, I have been in conversations with my brother, and I think for the first time, post campaigns and post the swearing in, he called the former prime minister his brother. And so we are ready for a bipartisan process that therefore tends to lead. And we expected that when the president was speaking, then we would see a proper process that tells us what are the terms of reference of this particular team. How much time is the team going to be in place? What is the feedback mechanism? Are there going to be reviews? What is the involvement of the citizens, if at all? Now, Azimio has taken advantage of that to be able to now present the different goalposts which are now coming to the place. and including the return of the demonstrations because of what we are calling lack of highest level political goodwill. If that would have been there, in their conversations, they would have agreed and dealt with all those issues. Because remember that all these politicians speak to and they report to their principals, which is where the goodwill rests. Now, by the time a Kenyan even receives a phone call from President William Ruto, like Mheshimiwa does, or receives a response on WhatsApp from Mheshimiwa former Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga, it will take this lady or this gentleman a very long time. And in fact, you ask yourself, what is your interest? Whereas for the politician, it is a one touch. So what therefore the highest level of political goodwill does is that you provide direction, because you are able to whip your parliamentarians or your politicians and tell them, this is the direction that we want to have. Now, if that would have been engaged, issues such as, for example, the majority leader being the one to present the list of Kenya Kwanza team would not have happened. Issues, for example, like we have had complaints from Azimio-Kenya Kwanza over Mheshimiwa Kenan Edan or Edan Kenan would not have arisen. Because then as the two politicians, the principals are speaking, as at the point of Mheshimiwa William Ruto saying, you know, in my list I have the following, then Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga would have said, but we have issues, or I have issues with that gentleman. So that by the time Linda it is in the public light, we don't see this back and forth, because the back and forth is costing Kenyans every day, both in terms of cost of living concerns, in terms of even emotions, because these people come from families, they come from communities, they come from regions. There are people who rely so much on the politician's word that unless Mheshimiwa here from Webuye speaks, there are people who will be really feeling a lot of headache and wondering, mbona hajaongea, why hasn't he talked? But just a word from President William Ruto sets a proper path. A word from former Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga really organizes things. And if that were to happen, we would not be hearing about return of demonstrations, we would not be hearing about all this name calling in political rallies. And that is what I think the highest level of political goodwill would have done for these conversations.
Professor Mashari Munene says there are two types of commanding individuals. First are those with statutory powers and have laws on their side, but the ability to exercise power is relative to their acceptability by citizenry. Second are those with no statutory powers, but they have authority that makes people follow them, perhaps referring to a classic example of what is happening in the country today. He goes ahead to say that Ruto has lost political authority in the challenge mounted by Azimio. How then do you confidently sit and tell us, Mheshimiwa, that the president has managed the right honorable Raila Odinga, whereas we see from what it is that this article speaks to, and of course it's quite an extensive one, we might not be able to go through it all. How can you confidently say that the president is in charge, is in control, when we also can see what played out in Kamukunji, large numbers, perhaps to confirm to us that again, when these people get to hit the streets, then there are likelihoods that the numbers will still be there?
See, I think, Linda, all of us were there in 2007 elections, the post-violence election 2007. There was violence across the country in almost 40 counties of the Republic of Kenya. But today, we're only having demonstrations in around 3 counties out of the 47 counties. That in itself tells you that there's already political goodwill. Kenyans have already embraced William Ruto presidency. If this violence could be probably happening, or the demonstrations are happening in half of the Republic of Kenya, you could say really Ruto is lacking both the legitimacy and the goodwill of the people. But he has already, actually, I think this demonstration happening in only 3 counties, it tells you that
only 3 counties, okay.
Of course, Kisumu,
yes,
part of Nairobi here, and sometimes Siaya and Migori. Tells you that Kenyans are ready and willing to support William Samoei Ruto. Secondly, I can tell you, the problem facing the Republic of Kenya is only one thing. It's only one. One person wanting every time to be president, while he doesn't have the luck and the will to be. He has struggled to be president, and things are not working out.
This one person, Mheshimiwa, we have to acknowledge is getting things at a standstill. And therefore, in as much as we'd want to castigate and, perhaps overlook him, we've not been able to do this. That is the reason why the president then reaches out and says that, well, let's have a conversation revolving around this. Is this a person you want to ignore? Let's take a short break and then come back on that.
Wakati mwingine kama weekend, mimi najiachilia.
Hata ukumbuki history. Nikifika watu wangu tu wakinipokea na kupokeleka. Umeset the mood. Nimeset the mood. Naweza kupokeleka. Nikitumai kwamba mzima popote pale ulipo, nikikukaribisha katika kipindi Mfahamu Kiongozi. Jina langu Elizabeth Mutuku. Katika kipindi Mfahamu Kiongozi tunakupa nafasi kutangamana nao kila siku ya Alhamisi kuanzia saa 1:30 kuendelea siku nyingine. Tutapatana papa hapa umjue kiongozi mwingine.
Jiunge nasi toka hapa hadi ufuoni mwa bahari. Meli yetu itakapotua nanga kwa uhondo ribo ya riwaya hii mwisho wa kosa. Monica.
It's early morning in Maralal. Start your morning informed, educated, entertained, and above all, know your country. From the beautiful plains of Samburu County to the skyscrapers of Nairobi, Morning Cafe certainly got you covered. Indeed, a beautiful place to watch and certainly a moment of understanding and knowing your country. Indeed, to the remotest parts of every county.
Join me, Linda Alela, every weekday from 6 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
The diversity of Kenya's wildlife has garnered international fame.
This is pellets that we give to the tourists, the giraffes. We ration because we don't want the giraffes to eat too much of this. We want them to have more of the natural browse.
We may not always get the opportunity to go out to see the wildlife, but you'll never miss the opportunity to see it from the comfort of your couch.
This is home to animals that have been found out there either injured.
All right, we're back, gentlemen, and of course, delighted to have the party leader of Justice and Freedom Party joining us. I saw him last week as well, alluding to this conversation of the bipartisan conversation, and so we will loop him shortly to get his view on the same. But we come back to you, Mheshimiwa Wanyonyi, who's here with us, the Member of Parliament with Webuye East, as well as the Executive Director of the County Governance Watch, that is Kevin Osido. So, Mheshimiwa, you are telling us that this big problem is about the Right Honorable Raila Odinga. The Right Honorable Raila Odinga would be out of the space of politics. Another person will come. Mheshimiwa, you do not want to overlook the fact that people of Kenya are decrying the high cost of living. That we're excited, the president then announces that beginning this week, we will have, unga prices going down because then we have imported mahindi that is pretty much affordable. First of all, as a country, that could be a good remedy, but we ask ourselves, why do we have to go to spaces where we have to import one of our staple meals? That means that there is a problem clearly that needs to be addressed, and because we can't keep importing affordable maize until when. But on the other side, a couple of other things are shooting up in prices, and we ask ourselves why. Just as Juma comes in and tells us that usingizi pia siku hizi imeongezeka bei, so those of us that are lucky enough to sleep like him should be having lots and lots of money, So this is the reality of the people of Kenya. Do you really want to put the Right Honorable Raila Odinga in this equation in terms of the problems that we have?
See, Linda, the way I've said, the biggest problem facing the country now is the fact that this only one person called Raila Amolo Odinga wants to capture power by all means, either legally or extra legally. He just wants to be president of the Republic of Kenya. That's why we are in this problem. And we, as a government, we thought now, how do we handle this? That's why the memorandum that went to Parliament, that the President wrote to the Speaker, we had offered to create a position of the leader of opposition. So that if indeed Raila insists he wants just to be in power, his place is the leader of opposition. And we are hoping through these bipartisan talks, one of the things that ultimately we can be able now to solve is creating that position. And of course, we've also said it will be funded by the taxpayers' money, so that at least Raila can.
Is it about right to Raila Odinga and the constitutional timelines? Do they allow for this to be?
Secondly, Linda, the issue of the cost of living. The cost of living has not really come because William Ruto is the president. We've had these issues even during the handshake. In fact, part of the problem we are facing now is trying to solve the problems that were created by the handshake government. The taxes, the corruption, and name them. How do you explain that they were able to withdraw around 15 billion within 26 minutes? So, in fact, and that's why when sometimes we listen to Azimio trying to advise us on how we are supposed to solve these problems, we just laugh it off, because these problems were created by Azimio. You look at now, even the debt itself now. We are 1 trillion and so. Oh, this debt has not come because of William Samoei. So I think really for us,
he was a deputy president.
Yes, Ruto was deputy
Kevin,
president.
thank you for asking that question. Because sometimes I find it difficult.
Ruto was president. Ruto was deputy president legally, but not practically. Practically, the deputy president was Raila Amolo Odinga. Practically, Ruto was de jure, but de facto was Raila Amolo Odinga. And so for me, that's what we are asking.
I think Mheshimiwa was out of the country.
No. Ruto was deputy president for the past 5 years of Uhuru's presidency. Past 5 years, we can say we were deputy president, both legally and practically we were. But second term of Uhuru Kenyatta, the deputy president was Raila.
Before we get that confirmation that the president tells us that unga will be affordable, allow me to loop in Dr. Justice Juma, who as well was eyeing the presidency, and perhaps with the knowledge that there was the handshake government, as they call it.
Exactly, and even before he comes in, ask us. You see, he was also eyeing the presidency, and things went the way they went. Why is it that he's not on the streets seeking for these bipartisan talks? Because he accepts.
He has been. Are you not in the streets? I thought I saw you on TV the other day, and that perhaps could be equivalent to being in the streets.
But allow me to. Before the president comes in,
we are with the president here, so
it needs to be clear that you cannot equate one position of an individual to 50 irregular positions. The 50 CSS. Even if we were to agree with him, which I don't agree with him, that you create a position for an individual, which of course is part of the challenges we have as a country, the official leader of opposition does not have to be Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga. And in fact, in the current framework, you will have to take Kenyans through a constitutional amendment, which is a referendum, to include such a position. But that must not be an excuse for the government, the Kenya Kwanza government, to create irregular positions, so that you tell us we will give 50 CSS, then you can have one for Mheshimiwa Raila. There are lots of rebuttals I would have given to his latest comments, but I want to allow the president.
And we'll come to that because we want to understand whether then, even if he speaks about an official opposition, it is about Raila Odinga, because initially they had said it's not about Raila Odinga. Then all of a sudden it's about
That's where we get it wrong, when we individualize the national institution.
Yes.
And Mheshimiwa, I've just received a text here, somebody saying Mr. Martin Wanyonyi is my MP. Please say hi. Tell him he's doing a good job.
Thank you.
I didn't know you well.
So you see,
now I may now invite you to I may now invite him to JFP. But that notwithstanding.
But allow me to ask this,
Yes.
Juma, even as you respond to it. My assumption is that by the time you were trying to reach out to the people of Kenya to tell them that, you know what, you'd love to run the country,
Right.
you must have tried your level best or have done your due diligence to understand the system of government then
Right.
and the kind of government that you would have inherited.
Yes.
I would expect for a good government to do the same.
Yes.
And so that the Kenya Kwanza did not do their due diligence to know what they would have expected, to know how they would have countered Raila Odinga, how they would have handled all these anomalies that they say or they claim.
Even right now, their approach is still inverted. Instead of approaching the solutions, the problems with a circumspect solution, they are still a bit linear in terms of their approach, because the issues affecting us in this moment that we're living in, they are global issues. The tightening financial policies is not only to Kenya.
Exactly.
Actually, just the other day, there was a conference of IMF in the States. Kenya was part of the conference.
Yeah.
And a number of countries rendered a number of proposals. And standing out, I think, is Nigeria, Ethiopia, and South Africa, who are negotiating for restructuring their debt burden. And Kenya has refused to adopt the same mechanism of restructuring its debt burden. In return, what has Kenya done? They want to continue paying their debts, but now their hands is in the education funds, their hands is in the health funds, their hands are in the things that are now affecting us. We're talking right now. So we can't develop because of taking irrelevant policies which cannot address the problems we are having. And as a result of their hands being in the education funds, the health funds, and the agricultural funds, what have they done? They've been forced to raise what? Taxes. And with all this, it becomes difficult even for companies like where you're coming from to be competitive with your neighbors in Uganda. And actually, it results into a job loss. So if you are talking about concreteness, forget about these ulabalus of Raila and all these other things. Linda, great minds don't discuss individuals, they discuss issues. And when it comes to issues that needs to actually change our life as a nation, we can't play around. Because as we're talking right now, people are affected direly and it requires circumspect leadership. We can't afford to be trapped by our tongues. Our minds will be trapped by our tongues, where people keep on with the populism, blame game, whereas people are suffering. The cost of living, as we're talking right now, is direly expensive, to a point that, yes, even salt now has grown. People have always complained why salt is low, but even salt is increasing in price.
Yeah.
A cost of living, as we're talking right now, is something which is affecting even him. It's not even affecting us only. Now an amount of your salary that the government is eating right now, leave alone the M-Pesa transaction, is immoral. If we were in a society that are conscious about their own people, we would even be having concessions. What measures are other countries have they taken? And leave alone even structuring our debts, because must we pay it? It is a general effect globally. You would also adopt, and that's where now we need individuals with proper policy framework. And no wonder we wanted individuals who merit those offices to be in those offices. When Kibaki came, he gave us Mukisa Kitui for trade, right? He gave us Moraria for finance. Akina Kalonzo were in the foreign affairs. Akina Raila were busy even creating roads in people's buildings, and now we have those roads even beyond people making noise. There were a little bit of competence. But today we have CSs, when you hear, they can't help this guy. He can't be the alpha and omega. When probably is a policy, international policy relationship is really not very effective as it ought to be. This PR works locally here, it doesn't work globally. So when these things are affecting people locally here, it is affecting us as a result of poor and bad leadership, which can be avoided. No wonder people like us were offering ourselves as alternatives, and we foresaw these things. Because eating Remember, in my campaign, I said Kenyans were being forced to choose between a fox and a wolf who should eat you. And these guys are literally, they have refused to create. They can't see how a citizen can also eat and see how much they're fleecing the citizen instead of feeling the citizen.
Yeah.
These are the challenges we're having with the leadership, which we are avoidable.
Okay, and how can we discuss then the politics without somehow looking at the individuals, perhaps just to act or the devil's advocate, How can you speak of a bipartisan approach which you all agree there's need for, but of course an extended one or perhaps extra parliamentary, and fail to discuss or talk about Right Honorable Raila Odinga, who is the head of Azimio as it stands right now. And he says that while we are having these bipartisan talks, then we're going to have parallel, demonstrations or demos in relation to as well the matter that is, at hand to be discussed. Can you just, realize then that somehow then this one very individual perhaps could be trying to, scaffold all the process, the entire process, and true to it, again, to act or the devil's advocate over years. He's been the common denominator of all these conversations of, political massive changes in the country, as well as, the states of despondence in the country.
Linda, the reason why this is happening is because, and I think we already alluded to it, the desire to want to create positions for people or to assume that when somebody is making some noise, you want to try and look for some corner. Na mwambia wetu tutakutafutia kitu pale tukishamalizana na watu wetu, So that is not a very progressive way of dealing with the challenges that Kenyans are facing. And remember that even as we talk about Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga, there are people who really do not know him, like probably even the first time voters of 2022 elections. There could be a majority of them who do not relate to the many stories that we are telling about both President William Ruto and the Azimio leader, Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga. The second issue is, are there any lessons that we are learning out of all these processes? Is there anything that 2007, 2008 really taught us? Are there any progressive things that we picked from the Supreme Court petition of 2013 and have really tried to work so hard to be able to fill them so that we slim the chances of Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga picking faults, if that is what we think he is doing? 2017, Kenyans actually were treated to 2 elections in 1 year because of a Supreme Court petition that was filed by Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga. Are there any good things that petition came up with that therefore were able to cure any chances of, again, complaints and issues by Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga in 2022? And the answer to all these rhetorical questions that I am asking myself are both yes and no. If we were to tighten some of the gaps that the Azimio leadership or the Azimio team are picking, then we would have actually been able to say that the 2022 elections are over and they have been dealt with. And that is part of what the president was saying yesterday in his address to the different congregants, particularly in Machakos where he was. And he was saying, elections are over, let's move on. But remember, what do you do, Linda, with somebody that contests for that election and loses by only 200,000 votes? Now, 200,000 votes in Kenya is a drop in the ocean. It is too small, particularly given the investments, the emotions, the resources, the kind of institutionalization that we seek to do, both for our political parties, the electoral management body, our IEBC, and all the other indicators.
But equally massive, Kevin, based on what is the constitutional stipulation, the 50+1. So in as much as it's a drop in the ocean, it's equally massive because it is that 200 that then gets the president crossing the margin.
That's correct. But that's where I am actually headed us to. So that when you talk about 50% plus 1, and then you say, but that 50% plus 1 is contested, which is why at some point I was saying that I was at Fungamano and I was really surprised at the kind of presentation that Azimio took Kenyans through. Because if you're a keen person and you really go through why they are saying that their votes were stolen, And in the manner in which the presentation was being given, you actually want to stop and think and say, hey, wait a minute. Is this the reason why Bomas was in chaos? Okay. Is this the reason why this was happening? So for a president who is in office and some people whom you led by a mere 200,000 votes are complaining about your legitimacy, and given the history that President William Ruto and the former Prime Minister have had from a gentleman's agreement and from a brotherly narrative, because each of them call each other brother, I think the honors and the best prize that you can give to Kenyans, like President Ruto gave us an Easter holiday, and he said, now we are going to ask Azimio to hold on these demonstrations. Let's have a talk. Go back and ask yourselves, but I thought we agreed we are talking. Why are you still threatening to have demonstrations? Why are you still thinking that my team is not giving you the best respect? That would be able to head us towards answering the many questions that we are asking ourselves. Because failure to do that, Linda, I will tell you that, as you rightfully said, there are many good things that Kenya has benefited from these demonstrations that Mheshimiwa Raila Amolo Odinga and his people have been organizing, both now and even in the past. Even for this particular one, there is something that Azimio leadership is eyeing, and they are going to get it.
And that perhaps could inform my next question. Briefly, before Mheshimiwa comes in, imagine a scenario where then the government gives in to this talk of open the server. Whatever the server is, then it is opened. Then there's some level of truth in what it is that Azimio says. What country will we have?
So, and that is where that takes us back to the highest level of political goodwill, because there is no mechanism, and I think that even the constitution is silent on many things. Even information held by the state, Kenyans have tried to acquire information that has been held by the state. And the best example is SGR documents, where the former president also came and told us, I'm going to issue these things in 2 weeks' time, you will have them. But up to now, that information is not with us. So in the event that the servers are opened, the truth will be known, whether the government is in office legitimately, issues around the Supreme Court and the people who are in the Supreme Court, the issues that Mheshimiwa Raphael Tuju was telling us about auctioneers, whether judges or commissioners were bought or who the auctioneers were. Those are things that I think might help Kenyans, especially those who are still interested in the next elections from a voter perspective. Because talking about the voter turnout, if we fail to answer questions that some Kenyans who feel really indebted in the process have, then we'll be playing with the turnout. And that's why I have said in the past that we might not see even a 30% voter turnout in 2027. So opening the server means we are giving the truth on mechanisms as to whether now the president will step down and say, okay, you won't take over. Because there is no constitutional mechanism to do that. So we cross that when we reach there. And that is why I think Azimio is already presenting different positions and saying, let's talk about this. And if you want, we allow you. And remember that they've continuously said, we don't acknowledge the government of President William Ruto. Whereas some of them are still in office, governors from Azimio are in office, parliamentarians, the same process elected them. So what does that therefore mean? So they are opening the server means that many things will be put to the table, and I think it will give Kenyans a closure to 2017 elections and also to 2022 as we now put forward progressive reforms to have a proper election in 2027.
And so, Mheshimiwa, do you still want to negotiate or have bipartisan talks with an Azimio that says they will hit the streets after Ramadan, with an Azimio that takes the Inspector General to ICC, as well as they threaten to do the same, implicating the Deputy President? Do you still want to have talks with an Azimio that says it has to be 3 key issues, the cost of living, the IEBC, as well as opening the server, while you really do not want for that to happen? So what are you telling Kenyans?
I think, Linda, the people of Kenya, the last election gave William Ruto the mandate to govern this country. The people of Kenya elected a parliament and delegated their sovereign powers to that parliament. And that's why, in that spirit, especially for us from Kenya Kwanza, we are ready and willing. That's why last week you saw us unveiling our team. That in itself demonstrates our commitment to participate and get involved in these bipartisan talks. Yes, we know there are issues around what they were talking about writing to ICC. In fact, if we are serious, if we are really serious as a country, if we talk about people going to ICC, then it should be the Azimio team. People were killed, properties were destroyed, just because of the goons that were guarding and hired by the Azimio team. If the police were to kill people, I can tell you we could have had so many people killed. But because we have a police that now somehow appreciates the rule of law, appreciates the need to protect the life and property of the people, we did not lose many lives. But for us as Kenya Kwanza, we have said that we are willing and ready to talk. That's why we unveiled our team. But we are also hoping that Azimio will come into these talks with open mind, with sincerity, with genuineness, with honesty. But the way we are saying, Linda, already they're already shifting the goalpost. Now, they don't want the parliamentary process. They want another extra parliamentary process because one, they're not even trusting their own team that they unveiled.
But would it not be fair for purposes of looping in the common mwananchi, for purposes of looping in,
See, Linda, I've told you, the people of Kenya themselves, under the constitution, delegated their sovereign power to parliament. They did that.
But we've seen certain groups as well alluding to this and acknowledging the need for the same. And these groups represent, constituencies, and so you cannot overlook that.
No, you see, this structure that has been created by both sides of the divide, the 7 members from Azimio, 7 from Kenya Kwanza. In fact, even we've gone ahead, even donated one position from our side by nominating a person from Azimio. That demonstrates, in fact, is that really a party that acknowledges the importance of multi-partism and briefly we can loop into Harry? Yes, our constitution and many other legislative practice permits us to practice by multi-partism. But again, look at the time we are in. We're in a time where we are talking about all of us coming together. Bipartisanship. How well can you practice that if you don't embrace your brothers and sisters on the other side?
Professor Naituli reminds us to look at the word bipartisan and perhaps understand it better.
We already, in fact, as Kenya Kwanza, we are already walking the talk. By having Canaan in our team to represent us, already we are walking the talk.
How are you walking the talk, Mheshimiwa, when what it is that you want addressed is perhaps a quarter of what it is that Azimio wants to address?
Azimio, let me be honest. Azimio are talking about so many things. They're talking about the cost of living. They're talking about opening the server. They're talking about IBC. In fact, they are even gone ahead to talk about disciplining of members who have crossed the floor. Now, ask myself, if today you've fallen out with your wife, how do you want the court or the parliament to help you to bring back your wife to you? It's not. There are things that are not right called.
Mheshimiwa, let me take it away from you.
And let me finish this. Linda, just a minute. Let me just finish. See, for us, what we are saying, and we've asked rightly this question, that how will these other stakeholders participate? Which I think really it's important. If we have to have talks, it must be talks that will involve each and every person who feels he has issues around what's happening in the Republic of Kenya. And that has already been provided. As we speak today, the team will sit, come up with the TORs, terms of reference on how they're going to work. And I know one of the things that will be done is how they are going to involve all these other stakeholders. And in fact, the Constitution allows them and permits them and obligates them to have participation of the people, which I know admin they'll read. So we don't need another structure, an extra parliamentary structure for the people to be involved. This structure that we've created will involve the people. Even the president here will come before that structure, that committee, and present his issues.
Mr. President.
We don't participate in answers that are already structured at the are captured already. The good book says that better blows that heart from a friend than kisses from an enemy. Because we have been very sincere and candid, especially with the government of the day. Actually, as a party, before the president took an oath, a day before, we issued a press conference. And one of the items among the 4 agendas we had was following the rule of law. And we advised out of love that the president may cease from vendetta or vengeance if he wants to see a successful regime. Linda, he did not listen to us. Last time he hosted me here, I also said that Kenya is a multi-party system, not a bi-party system. And any political discourse that is being addressed for Kenyans, not for the two, because the reasons why BBI failed, it was a bipartisan approach. And I, as Justice Ajuma, I am one of the petitioners who petitioned boundary limitation. And I tell you, it was successful all the way through the courts. This is why we are even warning them. Should they attempt, we will not even make noise. We will get you and it will not go anywhere. Like we stop BBI, it will stop. But if somebody is having the interest of the nation at heart and does not want to waste process, because one best friend of a leader is crisis. And the crisis we are going through today actually is a reflexive action that has been brought upon us by the same government, because anarchy beget anarchy, treachery beget treachery. The moment you fail to follow constitution, what else do you expect? The rest will not follow the constitution. Who was the originator of violating constitutionalism? Even when you talk about punishing the members, you call them wives who have separated from you. We have an constitutional provision, and this is what we should guard, even Mheshimiwa. The challenges we're having even with the parliament today is the executive capture of the parliament. We would not even be talking about opposition leader if parliament was doing their oversight role. But here is a parliament which has actually neglected its mandate, and now they are dancing sycophantly upon the tune of our government or the executive against the constitutional provision. And these are the things that are negating people's spirit according to the power we've given to you. If the president was to lead by example and showing the way, there is Political Parties Act, which requires every political party. Before we clear them, like I'm a party leader, I went through the process of clearing my candidates. It is not an easy thing, because sometimes you even do your own analysis and sometimes deny loyalists based on their strength and reward somebody who you know has a potential. Then they go there, instead of representing your ideologies, they cross the other side, they start presenting their own stomach. That is political prostitution, which has no constitutional provision even to govern it. Such a person should go back and seek what? New mandate. If they are not able to do that, then whoever is experiencing or promoting that or benefiting from that actually is equally a victim. So when you're talking about political parties, political constitutional or upholding the rule of law, beginning with the members of parliament, if a political party takes you into the assembly, stick by that political party. And that's why you need to understand that a political party, get to understand the ideology very well, and agree whether you need to stand by this political party or if it is not crossed earlier. But you can't violate and abuse another political party's opportunity and use it
in the name of freedom to association and
so
getting
that is punishable, and even the citizens are allowed to recall. So these are we're not functioning in utopia. And we've seen a number of mechanisms which even the court now has come to vindicate us. And the court, the judiciary itself, which we thought was captured, is now saying, you know what, enough is enough. And the other day, even on CAS, even Parliament itself gave very sober advice. So why this impunity?
Why?
And when somebody begin acting with impunity, then you invite anarchy. And that is what we are going through. And Linda, remember my words. I told UDA or KK government that where we've reached now, if they don't listen, right now they probably can have that government half-half. the way things have gone.
Is it?
And if they were smart, they would reach out to us and give us a quote and see how to talk. Or give ODM the half and see how tough it is.
Okay.
So if they fail to continue listening, last time they listened to us and they called off vote and they invited guys for talk. But I'm again prophesying, if they fail, it's very easy to lose the government when you all sit in a utopia and talk among yourself and entertain yourself and feel good, thinking that the citizens are not there. And you see, the problem they're having is that they're closing themselves around their own created enemy, and they know they realize their rival. You remember the guys that say choosing between a fox and a wolf, and all clamoring for what to eat, not knowing that there are individuals who are not just looking at the next election. We are thinking about the next generation. What ought we to do? And these guys, actually, they've even wasted their generation. Their generation is gone, and they're eating into ours, and they expect us to sit back and watch them. We are coming for them, and these are the reasons to why they can't survive.
And we're coming back to you,
and take it to us.
We're coming back to you so that you can tell us some more about the process of getting the select committee that is there, that is now being challenged, and what would mean in the event that then we get a different one.
Yes.
Before then, Kevin Osido as well, Mheshimiwa speaks to, and most of the people will speak to this question of, what is priority, what needs to be addressed. And for a moment, they say some of these things like, open the server and perhaps the formation of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission are perhaps not so much of what Kenyans would want addressed today. Do you agree to that statement?
I agree to that statement, and largely because of pure lack of leadership. And that's why I said earlier on that the political goodwill, highest level political goodwill, should have provided a direction. That we note the challenges, and I wish they consulted me just for a brief to do a political economy analysis on what they should have talked about. Because you begin by giving a context and you say that we note the issues that we have, and there are some of these things that are long-term, some of them are mid-term, some of them are short-term. So for the short-term issues, this is what government will do, because government is the government. Whether we like it or not, whether Azimio will appreciate it or not, there is a government in office. And Kenya, there is no vacuum really. And if in the event that there is a vacuum, there's a way in which you treat that vacuum. So government should have held a higher position of engagement. Then they provide us with the TORs and say that for the short-term issues, this is how the team is going to engage with a government, put together a secretariat, and then we churn out the issues. And that is why I am for the Azimio approach, where from the onset you are saying we bring in the citizens. Because you listen to every.
They've just hijacked our concept that we
then you agree. You agree on an agenda and say, what are your issues? Then the people will say, oh, yenu ya sava wekeni huko nini, ours is cost of living. Then you take it to the joint secretariat. The joint secretariat will say, as government on cost of living, this is what we are going to do. Because what the government is doing is to react to Azimio calls. And they are very frustrated because they know that when Azimio calls for demos, those demos have demonstrated that they are actually alive. People like them.
And you would expect that after Ramadan, there's going to be people who are going to go to the street?
We have heard the former Prime Minister saying it was just mapumziko, and that whether the talks are going on or not, there will be a parallel process. And when Mheshimiwa Raila says it, not just to say it's a constitutional right, because indeed it is, and the Constitution allows for that, when he says it, it will happen. So I think that government has not taken it very seriously, that we actually need to begin to have candid conversations around what are you demonstrating on? Because once we agree on the issues, Linda, and we say on cost of living, government will take responsibility on 1, 2, 3. Now, Kenyans will not demonstrate on opening servers because that one is a long-term issue. It is your own issue. And that is purely based on highest level of goodwill. So the prioritization aspect, each side of the political divide is looking at their own priority. So Azimio has said for us, these 4 issues are our key priority issues. And on that key priority issue list, this is our first agenda. Kenya Kwanza is saying And they are reacting because they have not told us what their issues are. They are saying Azimio has come to us with issues and there are non-issues. The only issue we are willing to have is a discussion around IEBC, for which in fact they have a prescriptive mechanism on how they want it to be dealt with. So that therefore, in my view, does not give us what we call a partner in negotiations. Best alternative to a negotiated agreement, because already you are closing doors for anyone who wants to engage. And that's why I think for me, Linda, agreeing on the issues from both sides of the political divide will be very difficult, because they are looking at it from a political perspective, and they're also looking at it from what is it that you are holding in your hands? Like we were being asked many years ago, and even today, we ask kids, I have a bird in my hand, is it alive or is it dead? So if you say it is alive, I open it and it goes. It is dead, I squeeze it and it dies, and then you lose everything. And I think that is purely because we have given everything to the political class. So Azimio is saying, if you want the bird to be alive, we will hold the demos in our hands, and if you give us what you want, we will release peaceful pigeons and say there is peace. If you don't give us, we'll kill it and we say the talks have died.
Unfortunately, the invitation of the International Criminal Courts, what does that mean? We have been through this process. We have seen many Africans saying that most of the cases that are presented there are treated with bias, most of the African cases. And there's a time the conversation was rife as to many African countries, exiting the ICC. Kenya included, based on what the president or the current president went through and the former president. The invitation of this today is an indication that as a people, we're not able to deal with our own local problems?
I think, Linda, Kenya is a nation among a community of nations. We have ratified the Rome Statute, which by virtue of Article 2.6 of our Constitution is now part of our laws. But again, if we remember what a former president, current president went through at the ICC, I don't really expect that Right Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga, at this level, he could be doing what he's doing today, right into ICC to open up investigations around what happened during his demonstrations. I think we need to reach to a point where we can trust our own institutions. Yes, we may not be to a level where the draft of the Constitution wanted us to be in terms of our structures, the police system, or rather the security system, or our judiciary system, but we can really agree that we are way ahead of many countries. And so it takes all of us to help in terms of strengthening of these structures. But it's a bit unfortunate that we trust Wazungu so much. The Africans trust Wazungu like me so much.
Like you.
They don't trust themselves. Really, ICC and the Rome Statute, its drafters knew and anticipated that for a country to decide to seek for justice to ICC, there's some level. It's not these small cases, you see, that can be handled at a national level. Like where we are today, the issue that they are raising are the issues that
can be handled in the country today. Do they have the confidence in the systems to handle this?
You see, confidence is the problem we face as a country, and especially our colleagues in Azimio. The only problem they face is that structures can only work if it's in their favor. If it's not in their favor, it's not working.
I think all politicians behave that way.
For us, we've been very clear. As governments, there are many cases we've lost, but still we trust.
And there are many you have withdrawn.
Of course, we need to also to be fair and honest to ourselves that many of those cases were politically
worthy.
Secondly, look at even the issue that are right in the ICC. Most of those things were really committed by themselves. Who called for demonstrations? It's Raila Odinga. It's Azimio. Why did they call for demonstrations? Was it even necessary? Was it called for to have these demonstrations? How do you go to demonstrate because of the cost of living? How can current Sufuria solve the cost of living?
We have seen revolutions across the world that were triggered by something as basic as what happened in Sudan, and unfortunately, Sudan is in bad shape today. But also, what happened was, the ouster of Omar al-Bashir was because of the prices of bread. And I mean, we have seen revolutions across the world that were triggered by, the food prices.
That is true. Yes, that is true. But you see, look at what William Ruto is doing in terms of solving the cost of living. Already, we have enough fertilizer in the country, subsidized fertilizer. During the handshake government, fertilizer was going for 7,000. Today is half the price, 3,500. We have brought in cheap maize to solve the cost of hunger as an immediate measure. But of course, we're also hoping that come August, the cost of maize will not reduce because of this cheap maize. And actually, even for us as members of parliament from Western, our position is clear that by August we don't want to see this cheap maize in the country, so that our maize can also be sold with the prices that they need to be sold with. Secondly, and so that's why for me, in terms of the issue of the ICC, is a bit unfortunate, and we are. If they have written to ICC, we are waiting to see what the ICC will respond and say. But if there's somebody who's supposed to go to ICC, it's supposed to be our friends in Azimio. It's not. It's not IG. It's not even the police that are trying to.
But don't you think it's contradictory when you say that we do not need to go to the ICC, but at the same time you argue that, well, if there's anyone who's supposed to go, then it has to be Azimio?
Exactly. It's not a contradiction. What I'm saying, if there's someone who's supposed to go there, it's not us. But we are saying even solving the issue that Azimio are raising, we are saying. Even when they saw and directed the destruction of property, the killing of the people, there's that student in Maseno who was killed, and many others. All those people were killed under the watch, and the property was lost under the watch of Azimio team.
All right.
But we are saying we are not at a level where we are supposed to go to ICC.
But we've already knocked the door.
We are an independent nation. None of us were there. We saw what really the 6 guys went through. I think really it's not right for us to go that direction again. We have a nation that is independent, that is sovereign. We have capacity and capability to solve our own problem as a nation.
Okay. Dr. Justice Juma, in the best interest of time, I hope that you quickly speak to this question of the ICC, but as well, just walk us through, what could be going through the minds of the select panel that was gazetted by the president and swung to action, telling us that we have around 800 and something individuals that had presented their interest to be picked as commissioners of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. And now perhaps things have to go to a halt, because then we have to incorporate the interest of the Azimio team that speaks to the formation and how it is important to look into the select committee and all that. What happens to these individuals? And I ask you this in particular because I know that as well you were amongst the few people who had requested or had presented their names to be picked as the select committee.
Well, when it comes to sovereignty of a nation, our sovereignty should not be bargained. And collectively, we actually donated through the constitution to the democratically provided institutions to represent us, so that we maintain that independence and that sovereignty. I would like to be in an environment where my daughters and my boys knows that this color matters. And if anything, they should be second to none, where in the face of humanity, not think less. But lately, ladies think marrying whites is a fashion.
Like me.
And now it's a goal, stuff like that. So those identity crises should not be playing among within a sovereign nation.
Right.
And this white inside thing require a lot of serious mind transformation for people to really believe themselves, understand their history, and also own their identity and defend it. Because sometimes I have friends, like I sit with Benjamin Netanyahu, and I listen to this guy, and you feel Israel in him. You see him as Israel, and he is Israel, and Israel is him. He's ready to die for it, you understand? And then that level of patriotism has been lacking. Maybe because of the language system, where we exalt these nuances and cultures from these individuals, and we think that they are much better than us. You know, the colonial mentality. And always, this one I will tell anybody, whether I'm still asleep, is that the international community do not have best interest at heart, or more so the African community. Actually, they're the ones who are instigating these uprisings and these violences. Why? For the sake of exploiting our oil, exploiting our resources, and then they will not keep quiet. Right now, they would be so interested, especially economic hitmen, to make this economy very vulnerable for their own gains. You just listed the type of loans that we need to be paying. When the dollar rate is increased, right now we are paying like 3 times what we ought to have paid then. Why? Because of this international manipulation. So sovereignty matters. But then how do we get there? Because 2 wrongs also don't make a right. I listened to judiciary reading the Supreme Court ruling on election. For once I was like, wait a minute. Even in primary school, that language is not passing. What informs such language? Even if somebody loses, and this is the electoral process, Mheshimiwa, we are looking for. We will always have a winner and we'll always have a loser. Can we have an electoral process where a winner goes home happy that I lost? And a loser goes home happy that I lost, and a winner goes continue working that with the legitimacy. But here is a case where we're having serious gerrymandering. Some of us who are participating in this process, Linda, even the courts have ruled that the nomination process for presidency was unconstitutional. Some of us, we were actually betrayed by institutions that should not. Imagine ESCC of all the people can take away your ID numbers and then publish another ID which is not even yours, and they say, now this one has registered fraudulently, let's kick him out. And those are the institutions we are talking about. We are waiting to guard our sovereignty. Those are the challenges we are having. So if these institutions are not functional, I tell you, people will be forced now to look outside, which is not a good thing at all. To me, this government has brought us there. If we are looking at the root cause, because when you're looking at symptoms and signs, we can blame the Azimios and all these individuals. But who are the root cause? Who are the failures? Who have brought the failures? We had very good political goodwill with our judiciary during Maraga time. Even in the Mutunga period, it was not that bad. But look at where we are now. People have almost zero trust or faith, if not the government, in the judiciary. To an extent that things that could be addressed here, now people have to go outside.
Proceed out.
And those are the challenges we're still having also in the formation of even the selection panel. Because this gerrymandering are not stopping. When you design a process where Public Service Commission is bringing 2 people, and we know that is government, isn't it? Parliamentary Service Commission is bringing 2 people. We know that the government has a hand. Already that's majority of the 7, isn't it? And then we are talking about political party, and we have religious community who are bringing 2 people.
LSK.
And an LSK. So probably if political party would have brought an independent, circumspect person, who would be happy. But the political party system where we also participate, we saw where voter bribery was at a level that we can't tell.
So you want to say that the process as well was flouted?
To a point that the president's person has won. Okay. And the way he won, you look at it and you're like, wait a minute. So you, as fellow players, you are like, why are we victims, or why are we victims of this individual? Why should he capture us? And what is his interest? Why does he want the selection panel? And why doesn't he want a panel that can bring us an independent a commission which can sort out our electoral problem? All these things we are going through, even economically, are because of our electoral process.
And as well, so you would say that that is a question of priority?
Well, if anything affecting this country has always been election, we are okay. We don't even know our tribes. We marry across the board until election comes. That's when you hear somebody is coming from where, somebody is coming, and people start butchering each other because of election. So if we do not address the election. And this is what this my brother is playing with.
Yeah.
If he keep on playing with this, he's playing with fire. And that is why I was telling him he's provoked or touched a button that actually cannot go back. And he can add fuel to this fire. He's the one who will keep burning. You feel you have positive ratings in central Kenya? KK thinks so. But because of the things that happened to Akina Uhuru, do you think they have entire votes now? Their ratings are going down. Is them losing? Actually, it's like a cow which is losing its value. It's the government losing its value.
Okay.
And this time they are losing it as an alarming rate. So if they wanted, and this is out of a goodwill, if they can be smarter and better than me in the next election and win, I would want to be served by a capable government who is ruling and have the proper goodwill of the people.
Yeah.
Not a gerrymandering person who will come again and cause people to fight, bring chaos, and with impunity, with the name calling, the way they divide themselves and start thinking that no, Kenya begins with Raila and an end with Ruto, and the two of them is Kenya, and that's the end of it, and ignore all other players. They can step on you. Media was called what? The other day was branded bandits, isn't it? And they were being tear gassed. I've seen journalists' blood flowing in this country. So even the fourth estate, if you keep on giving them coverage and sustaining their narrative of Kenya begins with both of them, when they kill you, where do you go to? Still us who come back to talk to you. So I think that Kenyans and the citizens, we must be circumspect when it comes to matters of leadership.
Right.
And we must have foresight. When we're talking about having the selection panel, there's a constitutional provision on how we need to arrive to this committee. So if the panel was not satisfying, and I know, yes, as a candidate, Azimio guys boycotted.
As you got to chase.
And since they boycotted, well, I was looking at their end game. Now I've seen their end game. And it mandates that people talk.
Okay.
It mandates that we review. And some of those proposals are actually out of the jurisdiction of the parliament. They are people's mandates, which actually is imperative that you go back to the people.
Yeah.
No wonder I would rather we have a multi-sectoral, not just a multi-party approach, where we have a sober discussion.
Yeah.
And then this will be for the benefit of the president.
All right, let me take it away from you and to you, Kevin, to close it up for us. Wakili Njegwa Njiro sends quite an extensive, analysis of this ICC matter. He says it's an ICC complementarity jurisdiction and why Mr. Koome stands exposed. The letter by Azimio inviting ICC prosecutor to monitor the Kenya situation should not be taken lightly. And therein, he speaks to a raft of matters, perhaps even without being a legal mind and having witnessed what played out during the ICC matter. And we keep saying that they're still around, hovering and all that. One of the things that was used to, threaten the current president also in his bid to get presidency. I mean, do we really have to go this way?
Linda, it is quite unfortunate. And why these options are there are purely because of the two things. One is mis and distrust in our institutions. That there are people, and they're not just people, they are very high level people who do not have trust in some of our institutions. For example, the office of the Inspector General of Police. You cannot joke around with that institution. And further to that's one of the institutions that was actually indicted at the ICC. And we had an IG actually going to the ICC in the past. The second reason is because people are hopeless and very helpless at the same time. So they are looking for hope, which unfortunately they don't think that is coming from the government. And even if it is some help, it is a help which is taking too much time. Yet the government said 6 months, 2 weeks, 2 days, our time in office, 100 days, very many promises that spelled a lot of hope and goodness for Kenyans. But it's been 7 months, very many weeks, more than 100 days, and people cannot see it. So a majority of Kenyans, particularly those who follow Azimio, are groping and grappling. And it's even much more difficult because for the first time in our history, we have been unable to pay public servants on time.
Yeah.
And so all these things are making people begin to ask so many questions, which unfortunately government have failed to respond to. So one of those options, Linda, therefore become the ICC process. And the reason why that becomes a concern, and it should be a concern to the government, is because you basically begin to ask the question, are we doing enough to be able to provide confidence among the electorate or among citizens that our institutions are actually working? Reminds me even of how the name of the IG was floated before State House, and the president is also confused and is asking. There was an ongoing conversation around the Inspector General of Police. Where is Bwana Kinyua? Did you complete? And I'm like, both. You've been sworn in, and is this how you want to navigate around very important positions?
Yeah.
So people already saw loopholes in the president, particularly in dealing with some of these institutions. So Azimio is actually amplifying that gap, and they're saying this is one of the loopholes. And the reason why this loophole is in existence is because by constitution we are allowed to picket.
Yeah.
Mheshimiwa, even if you talk about the people who are shot, and we still agonize, and we are really empathetic, and those shootings should not happen.
Yes.
But the question that any good-meaning person who wants to have that conversation will have is, who owns guns in this country? If there are bullets that were released, were they rubber or were they live? And if they were either rubber or live, who has live or rubber bullets in the country? It is the police.
Yeah.
Which is why, Linda, in other quarters, we have actually asked for institutions, agencies like IPOA, to begin investigations, Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, to come to the fore. If the threshold of the fact that the police interfered with Azimio and the IG authorized people to go and shoot, and we augment that with the kind of videos that we have seen of a gentleman actually breaking a door of the screen of a vehicle and shooting, whether it was tear gas or bullets or whatever, that already complicates and invites the ICC. Why? Because you do not have confidence, you don't have trust in your own institutions, and that is partly why institutions like the ICC exist, so that people who are considered weak by systems and structures that have been put in place to provide justice and to give them strength can actually have a door where they can go and knock and say, I've been sent away from my house. Can you be able to give me a place to sleep? If you send me away, I'll go and steal. If I steal, the police will beat me up.
Right.
So the ICC is, and remember, I think the president's case is still open at the ICC. If that is one of the other issues. So the president should be as concerned about this issue, which is why I think for me, the demos might not be the answer, but is also a pressure that Azimio wants to use. And they're also throwing it back to the police, and they're saying, if we hold our demonstrations, and I heard them talking about peaceful demonstrations, which is part of what we have continuously asked anyone who wants to demonstrate. Our kids must go to school, businessmen and women must do their things, and you must not interfere. But the question is, will the police be accountable enough to ensure that they do not interfere with peaceful demonstrators? And in the event that anyone wants to break into anybody's shop, will the police exercise its responsibility to be able to protect those properties without killing anyone?
We have to close completely. 30 seconds, Mheshimiwa. 30.
I think, thank you, Linda. For us as Kenya Kwanza, we are ready and committed and to the talks. And that's why our leader of majority last week wrote to the Speaker for proposed names and our memorandum ready for tabling in the House. So we are hoping that our colleagues on the other side will also present their names and their position, and they will come with sincerity, with honesty and genuineness into these talks. But one thing, Linda, that we will not accept is also to create another extra parliamentary structure that will allow Raila to select himself to sit on that particular structure.
All right.
We want to see a structure that includes.
Don't you think that Raila is at the heart of this anyway? He does not require, but anyway, let's wait and see. We have to close.
He doesn't trust anybody. He only trusts himself.
Okay.
And for anything to move, he must sit there. For once, let us allow the structure that we Kenyans ourselves establish within our constitution to work.
Okay.
Let's allow Parliament to do its part. Let's allow the President to govern this country
Yeah.
and solve the main issue that the country is facing now.
Fair enough. Mheshimiwa Martin Wanyonyi, Member of Parliament, Webuye East, thank you so much. Dr. Justus Juma, the Justice and Freedom Party leader, thank you so much as well for the great insights. And last